Hi there, John. Welcome to the newest episode of Conquering Star Wars, the show where I try to get through every single canon piece of Star Wars content before the release of Episode 9. Now, you might be worried, is this all Cameron is going to be doing on Wi-Fi Friends from now on? No, I've got a completely different video that I'm filming this weekend and I'm going to be editing soon after. The only reason that I'm uploading another Conquering Star Wars so soon to the last one is because I literally just finished another audiobook. So I wanted to get my opinions on camera as soon as possible. So, let's jump into it. I listened to the audiobook for Star Wars from a Certain Point of View. This is a collection of short stories, a huge collection of short stories, that take place during the events of Star Wars A New Hope, so the original movie. But the gimmick is that the stories, for the most part, are all about characters that did not get the spotlight in A New Hope. They're all about side characters. This is one of the coolest, most interesting additions to the Star Wars canon. This collection of short stories is like such an exploration of that movie and an exploration of the whole universe from so many different perspectives. So every single short story is written by a new writer. I've got the list of writers here. There is no way I can read them all out and not just waste everyone's time. But I will give you some of the names that come up right now. Gary Whittaker, Griffin McElroy, you've got Claudia Gray wrote one, you've got Chuck Wendig, Paul Dini wrote one, you've got stuff by Will Wheaton, you've got stuff by, like, Pablo Hidalgo wrote one. Like, this is one of the biggest collections of short stories that I've ever read, and they all take place during A New Hope. Now, it started hailing outside, so I'm sorry if the audio is a bit weird. Now, this is fantastic. Every story is unique. Every story has a different perspective. It's got a different writing style. You are bombarded with all these different types of telling stories. Some of them are first person. Some of them are third person. Some of them are like Shakespearean dramas. Like it's insane. I want to talk about the individual stories, but I can't really do that because there are so many, and it would take videos on each of them to really express my opinions. So I'm just gonna highlight in this, before I give my little bit of a review and a score, some of my favorite stories. So there's a story in here about the stormtrooper who hits his head in that one blooper that got left into A New Hope. There is a whole story about that guy. There is a story, a lovely, amazing, tragic story about the little mouse droids on the Death Star, and this mouse droid taking messages from one stormtrooper to one officer, and that officer may or may not be a character from the Star Wars Aftermath books. It's left very vague, but it got me very excited. There is a story about what Lando was doing during A New Hope that is amazing. It was so good. It was so fun to hear that perspective. There's a story about the droid, the red droid that Uncle Owen chooses but explodes, and then he has to choose R2-D2 instead. There's been theories about that droid for years and years and years, and we finally get an explanation as to what happened there. And the best thing about all these stories is they're canon, and it's insane. Now, I will say, I listened to the audiobook for this, and I recommend doing that specifically for this. Now, usually it doesn't make much of a difference, but what happens in Star Wars from a certain point of view is each of the audiobooks are read by, different voices. And yes, you'll see, if you listen to a lot of Star Wars audiobooks, you'll see reoccurring voices from a lot of the other Star Wars audiobooks. But what they do is they do interesting things. For example, they have guest readers. You have John Hamm reading a short story from the perspective of Boba Fett. So essentially, we have John Hamm playing Boba Fett. It is amazing. We have Neil Patrick Harris in one of the stories. You get all these amazing guest readers, but what you also get is within stories, sometimes they'll have two readers. If the story calls for the voices to be very different, they will have two readers teaming up, and that's really cool. This, more than any other Star Wars audiobook, I would recommend to listen to, as opposed to, get the actual physical book. I mean, get the actual physical book as well if you can afford it, because that would be, great for Star Wars, and this book needs to be supported. Again, I haven't really said a lot of my specific opinions because of how vast the stories are. I will say there are some in there that I like better than others. Some of them were, you know, the worst ones were like fine. The best ones were spectacular. So there were none in there that I was like, oh, this is awful. There were a couple that I was like, okay, that was, you know, that was cool. But overall, these stories were fantastic. Great additions to the canon. We get answers for things we didn't even have questions for. Just because some of the stories were down and some was up, I can't really judge the whole book on the best stories. So I'm gonna give this a 4.5 out of 5. Almost perfect score. Like, I felt bad giving it a 5 out of 5 because some of the stories were a little bit less and you kind of had to like go, oh, okay, this one isn't as good as the last or the next one. But it is still essential. If you love Star Wars and you don't know which book to start with, because there are a lot out there, trust me, I'm trying to get through them all. This is a great one to start with. It is amazing, it is varied, it'll give you, you know, laughter in one chapter and you'll be crying in the next. And yeah, I highly recommend this book if you are a fan of Star Wars A New Hope, or even just Star Wars in general. There is stuff for everyone. Yeah, so that's my review of this particular Star Wars book. I'm still going to get through it, but like I said, this is not all that I'm doing on Wi-Fi Friends. I just thought it would be fun to have a series that I can come back to every so often. Maybe I'll do a couple in a row, or maybe there'll be a month where I don't do any because I'm trying to get through, you know, the Clone Wars or something, and that's going to take me ages. Thank you so much for watching, John, and I'll see you in the next one.